before. Welcome, Peter. And now there is a second speaker, and that is Matthias Mann. Matthias, can you introduce yourself?
Good afternoon, everybody. Hope you will have a nice session together with us. My name is Matthias Mann, working for HERE Technologies, representing HERE within the project, and being part of the Socrates gang from the beginning of the project, and happy to share some insights and findings with you today.
Okay, thank you, Matthias. And for myself, I am Mark Rood from the Dutch National Road Traffic Data Portal, so the NDW for short. I will guide you through this session. And in an interview with Matthias and Peter, we will tell you about the challenges we encountered in the Socrates 2.0 project. We also will ask you 2 questions via the Mentimeter to hear your opinion. So there is a little bit of interaction, and we will try to answer your questions or your input in the Mentimeter. But first, Matthias, what are enablers and bottlenecks at all?
Good questions, and we were thinking hard of that at the beginning of the project. So we come up with a definition which you see here. So enablers are, I would say, topics which can facilitate or accelerate the development of something, in our case, interactive traffic management solutions. And bottlenecks are topics or issues which can delay or even hinder you in accomplishing your goals. And as this is very important to accomplish something, right? We decided at the beginning of the project to give it a closer look and identify, at least from our perspective, and at that time, the most important ones.
Okay, and Peter, why did we analyze them?
Yeah, so when you revisit the slide about the cooperation framework, which we can see right now, you can imagine it's a very complex story. Yeah, so we have many different partners on board. We have public authorities, we have private service providers, and we have, of course, the road user in the middle. Yeah? So you can imagine that when you establish a deployment, you will most likely encounter so-called bottlenecks, which are challenges of any kind. The same way you may encounter opportunities or enablers which make the concept efficient and viable. So we, of course, we had our experiences in Socrates, but we also foresee that such enablers, bottlenecks may be encountered as well in other projects, in other cities, in other countries in Europe. So we thought this might be interesting to analyze them in a structured way, just to have our lessons learned, to have our experiences, maybe some guidelines for other deployers across the continent. Yeah, so this is why we put them together, and it's put on paper in different aspects, and we're gonna elaborate on some of those enablers and bottlenecks next. Thank you, Mark.
Yeah, we're going to discuss some of them. Yeah, because there are multiple enablers and bottlenecks, but we'll discuss some of them. Matthias, what are categories of enablers and bottlenecks where we have defined in Socrates?
So when you look at the next slide, you will see the 6 categories we identified, and as important for our project. So it's not an exclusive set, there may be more. And the first and probably most crucial one for our project is the data category, because in an interactive traffic management solution, it's all about exchanging information and content, because this will help you, public and private service providers, as well as the road users, to align. And this is what we aim for, have, I would say, a common understanding of what's happening on the road, a common understanding how we want to guide and probably detour traffic. So information about how we want to do that and how the actual situation looks like is very crucial. technical, as you can imagine, is crucial because you need to have the right technical framework to actually enable the exchange of information. So this is about compatibility to a legacy system which are already in place. It's about interfaces between the participating parties, so very important. Organizational, for Socrates, that was actually the point where we said, okay, let's elaborate on the question, how can we work together and how do we want to work together in the future? So which means do we see to change the way we're working together compared to what we do today? Because there are benefits we see when moving the way of working together to a different level. Business for private companies, very important. So without sound business models, we can for sure elaborate on interactive traffic management solution in a framework like we have it in Socrates. But if we don't make the step further, you will never see those services on the road. So identifying money flow and value-adding services where customers or whomever is willing to invest in is very important. Legal category, legal also plays a role because when you talk about data, it's about liability, for example. It's about how you want to share data with each other. So it's also very important to consider that when working with more than two stakeholders, but it's also very important for two stakeholders. And the conceptual category, which is probably more about the way you organize your project. So trying to speak the same language, identifying and agree on a methodology, how to actually come from a vision towards a use case description and then an harmonized and aligned implementation.
Okay, thanks, Matthias. That were the categories we have identified. But now I want to make a question to the audience. We use the Mentimeter for this. So go to menti.com and enter the code, and the code is 85211284. It's on the screen right now. Or you can use your camera on your phone and scan the code, the QR code on the right side. We have a question in the Mentimeter. You see the question as well on the slide. What are, in your opinion, the most crucial enablers and bottlenecks for interactive traffic management? Please let us know. Put your comment in the Mentimeter, and in a moment we will see your answers and we try to react on it. I'm talking, so you can search for menti.com and put in the code. Okay, but in meanwhile we continue what we learned in Socrates. So Matthias, which data enablers and bottlenecks did Socrates encounter?
Well, as said, data is crucial for interactive traffic management, and data is actually an enabler and can be a bottleneck as well. So first of all, it's about accessibility to data. So there's many data available. Sometimes it's buried deep in the legacy system and it's very hard to get access to it, right? The second is that you need to align on the terms and conditions if you can make this data available, how you can actually use it, right? And last but not least, with regard to accessibility, and we touched that shortly, for sure data can make available or accessible, but to which costs? So there is always a cost factor behind. Then it's about availability of data for new services, probably you may need access to new kinds of data. And in Socrates, we had the ambition to introduce the so-called feedback loop, so to get actually information on end user behavior, so learn more about their follow-up rates. And we thought that on the service provider level, this kind of information is somehow available because they have the connected devices. They probably do or can track and trace people. So we thought, why not use this information in an anonymized way and evaluate it and see how the recommendations provided by the road authorities result or are received by the travelers. But this was, I would say, a non-educated assumption we had. So this data is, in most of the cases, not available at all because it's very, very sensitive. So data privacy and GDPR plays a role there. Then we elaborated on the quality of data, and that as well can be a bottleneck or an enabler. So high quality data can for sure power new services and solutions. Question is probably, how do you evaluate the quality of the data if you have no comparison? So how to actually address that? And if you have data coming from several sources, how can you compare quality between different sources? And can you make that in a way that it is fully transparent, or do you need to consider, I would say, the intellectual rights of the companies providing the data? And last but not least, it's also all about standards. So yes, there is data available, but if you don't describe it in, I would say, a harmonized way, and this is where a standard is for, you will have to put many efforts in actually first interpreting the data to make it comparable. So standard is crucial to limit integration for efforts, because standards are there to actually facilitate smooth integration of services or data. But second, this only makes sense if the standard is used in a harmonized way.
Yeah, well, let's see if the same, maybe more data issues are in the answers of our audience in the Mentimeter. So let's look at the reactions on our question. What are, in your opinion, the most crucial enablers and bottlenecks? And yes, there are some data issues as well. So data standards, no data harmonization, of course. But the thing that was mentioned by a few people is trust. Well, can you react on that? Did we encounter that as well?
I would say that was the how you call that, the red line or the green line throughout the project. So trust is very important if you really think about cooperation, or even if you think about projects where you have what Ulrich mentioned, co-opetition, right? And trust can be built if you organize your project in an open and transparent manner. If you agree, and I would say, on ways of communicating with each other. And in Socrates, I think we took the time to learn, I would say, about each party involved. Where are the red lines? What are his ambitions? And then actually agree on what do we want to achieve together. And I think that was a good setup. And not to forget, this was empowered by project management as well, because project management is guiding this group, right? And our project manager, Tiffany Flannings, did a very good job there, bringing the people to the table and moderating the discussion and even controversial discussions we had. And probably, Peter, you want to add to that?
Yeah, trust is a big word, Matthias. Yeah, but I think in a project as ours, we had trust from the beginning because we had the same goal. We had a contract and some agreements on paper, but we also had some, let's say, personal interrelationships. So it was easy to gain trust. But imagine, Matthias, to how to make trust in a really big data ecosystem, maybe looking into the big players like Google and big companies you don't even know personally. So trust must be elaborated on many dimensions, on a contractual basis, but also on a, let's say, on a win-win-win basis that we also follow in Socrates. So there are many, let's say, pieces of the puzzle that brings trust forwards. Yeah, and we have to look at all of those.
Yeah, I see also some about business models. Well, we will talk about that a little bit later. I see also some more technical issues, quality of data, incentives, yes, of course, also. But for the technical, Peter, what were the technical issues we encounter in Socrates?
Yeah, so I saw in the Mentimeter there were some technical comments like, I don't know, silo systems or something that I have read. Okay, so when we look into the technical dimension, it's of course about data, but also about how to embed such data into wider systems. Because data as such doesn't make any sense. You have to use it, you have to process it, maybe you have to save it, fuse it, and disseminate data. And when we have, let's say, traffic managers in our audience, they are probably very used to their traditional traffic management centers, which of course exist for many years across Europe. Maybe they are small ones, big ones, low-tech ones, high-tech ones. So there are many forms of traffic management systems and centers. And the question is now how to upgrade such centers in a harmonized manner to be able to have innovative traffic management schemes as shown here in Socrates. And our philosophy is that such legacy systems must be upgraded in an interoperable and harmonized manner, so you can easily incorporate other partners or cooperate with service providers, yeah? And this is done via interfaces, via standardized, let's say, ecosystems. So there are different concepts, but you have to really reinvest and invest into your legacy systems. So in many cases, TMCs as they are may not be sufficient. Yeah. So this goes for the legacy aspect, and there are of course many other technical issues that have to be covered. So we also have the question on board, what is the outreach of our concept? And here we're looking into the penetration rates of vehicles with connected features. Of course, the newer a car is that you buy, the more probable connected feature is embedded already, because it's more or less a standard today. But you still have to reach critical mass of users. So we need to make sure that market penetration of those end user services is sufficient as well. Yeah, what else did we write down? So we have the life cycle aspect of the industry partners, which of course have to make sure that their planning and their investments and the design of systems and vehicles and products they have matches our traffic management concepts as well. So you have to make sure that each product that you buy needs some time to be developed. And of course, it's not, we cannot expect that when we have a Socrates use case, it can be implemented in all cars from tomorrow on. So it takes some time for the development. But it also goes for the traffic management centers. Yeah, they have also the life cycles. So these the life cycle aspect needs to be also considered. Yeah, let's see if I have anything on my list. Yeah, it looks there was a third one. Yeah, connectivity. Yeah, so this was the connectivity feature. The maturity aspect goes for things like scalability. So maybe for a service provider, it's important to have concepts ready that are mature and scalable enough to be deployed in a wider sense, so they can deploy their services across Europe and even better across the planet, because there's no sense to have a traffic management use case which only goes for Amsterdam or only for Munich. You have to have things ready that can be reused and scaled up anywhere. And the maturity has to do with this, as well as with other aspects such as data quality and other technical aspects. So many issues to be tackled. We did, we did some starting ground here in Socrates, but of course they need more elaborations.
Yeah.
And may I have a comment on the Mentimeter?
Yeah, of course.
So it's out of the structure we had, but there was one topic mentioning smaller road authorities, and yes, so we also thought about how can we actually enable smaller road authorities with probably little manpower, little knowledge on the topic of fancy interactive and cooperative traffic management. And looking at the cooperation framework we built, we are pretty confident that this stepwise approach, so starting with the exchange of data, so making information available to both parties, is probably a barrier which can be handled even by smaller road authorities. Nevertheless, we had to admit that this may be related to having the right experts on board, which can support in identifying the right standards, identifying the right technologies to make this data available. But it's possible, but finding those experts is a challenge which we faced in the project as well. So naming DATEX2 as one of the standards for traffic management in Europe, we figured out that there's a lot of information available. So the website informs about, or gives details into the standard. But actually, when you go back to the companies or road authorities, you figure out that there's little knowledge on site. So you need to bridge that gap. And that's very important. And I think for smaller road authorities, this is probably my advice or our advice. So try to identify the right experts, start small. And this is always about opening up or joining an ecosystem. And if it's just a discussion at the beginning to learn the language we are using in this ecosystem, and then identify for yourself which are feasible ways to proceed, then you will have a starting point. And if you have managed that, probably it will be easier to make the next steps where we are talking about shared view or even the coordinated approach.
Yeah, and that was what we encountered in Socrates, the collaboration between public and private parties, and that's also stated in the Mentimeter. There's some things about business models. Matthias, what what did we learn about the collaboration between public and private?
Well, with regards to business, you mean?
Yeah.
Well, if we take it generic, so we figured out that there's a lot we can learn from each other. And this starts with the common language, as also mentioned in the Mentimeter, if I remember well. So, and it's also about the capabilities of each other. So what does it mean if you calculate a route from A to B? What information can you consider and what not? And I think that's the beginning if you talk about public-private partnerships. So how can we actually learn from each other and together come up with better solution? With regards to the business models, well, Socrates, you have a very specific setup because it's co-funded. So it's still an invest, but at least there's some money in place, which helps you developing, I would say, first solutions. In the end, it's all about what I would call identification of the economic justification of the investments you make, right? And therefore, and this is relevant for public and private. So even or also public entities will not invest because there's money from the taxpayers. They need to justify their investments. Therefore, we looked from the beginning when elaborating on the solutions and use cases for the win-win-win. So what is actually in for public, private, and the road users to buy in, so which justifies the invest. This may be an economical value or it may be a socio-economical gain you have, but this is very important. So make sure that each participating actor identifies a win, because otherwise it will be difficult to convince him to join. Second is that probably for the more advanced cooperation scheme, impact-driven business models may be a way to go, where you reward the participating parties when they provide impact. And this can go down to the end users, because if he's following advices, he is actually generating impact. So why not incentivize him for that, right? And again, that is always related to what's in for all of them and the way you can monetize it, but it's a way to actually break up, I would say, the solutions and models we have today. And what else? Yeah, to put it bluntly on the table, missing business models may be the main obstacle for the introduction of interactive traffic management. And this is why we think in Socrates, this is also the topic where we need to put more and additional effort in the future to further elaborate.
Yeah, very important. Yes, of course. One look at the Mentimeter, and I see that there's one issue we didn't tackle, and that is the legal framework. Peter, can you tell us something about what we learned about the legal enablers and bottlenecks in Socrates?
Yeah, the legal stuff. Yeah, so I'm a traffic engineer, so I always thought the legal stuff is boring. Actually, it can be very, very fascinating when you look into legal issues here. So I will give you an example. Yeah, for a traffic manager, it might be very interesting to find about individual movements of travelers. So let's imagine you will have a picture of the OD movements, origin and destinations of each traveler. You can much better or much individually or more individually make your traffic management schemes. But such data about individual movements is of course very critical, because it's yeah, it's a privacy topic, and you know about the GDPR, and that you're not allowed to give away data about persons and their characteristics. So those that kind of data is not has not been in the focus of Socrates so far, because most of the data that we have covered were anonymized or very aggregated, so it was not possible to get back to persons. But there have been yeah, discussions about making such data available, maybe also for feedback loops or for control mechanisms where you try to figure out how people react to your management schemes. So you will have some acceptance rates maybe and coherence rates. And the other example that I already explained, it was about individual movement. So we have to find ways how to make this possible without hurting or without hurting the GDPR and other privacy issues. What we also have written down on the legal side is liability, which is number 3 here on the slide. So this goes for cases where a service provider takes on responsibility when transmitting legally binding rules. For example, dynamic speed limits. So we have one use case in Socrates where such variable speed limits were displayed via a smartphone app. So you can ask yourself, what happens if there is some technical failure and the wrong data is displayed and the driver makes something stupid and maybe causing an accident? Who is liable in this case? So it might be any party. And of course, you have to find rules and fair agreements to deal with this topic. And the last one here on the slide is data ownership. This has to do with the very complex data ecosystems that we are developing. And there are many, many data being produced. And you might ask yourself, who owns the data and who can make a business out of it? Because each data has a value. So we need to describe and define in a fair manner what rules should look like when dealing with data in a multi-party agreement environment, as we have here in Socrates. So these are many aspects that are still open, up for discussion. So they have been covered in part by Socrates, but probably there's much more elaborations needed on the legal side in future projects. Mark, this was it.
Okay, thank you, Peter. Now for our second question then to you as the audience. So go once again to menti.com and enter the code. The code is 85211284, or use your camera and scan the QR code on the right side. We have the following question for you. Which enablers and bottlenecks did you encounter in your projects? And if you give your examples, you can give multiple answers. We will see your answers in a moment and we can respond to them, hopefully, if we have enough time. So which enablers and bottlenecks did you encounter in your projects? Hopefully you can put your answers in the Mentimeter. In the meantime, Peter, you and Matthias told us a thing or two about the enablers and bottlenecks. Where can I find some detailed information and more in-depth analysis of this?
Yeah, I hope the audience is now very interested to learn more. Yeah, and as I said, we did a really detailed analysis on all those enablers and bottlenecks in our report. So there's a report on the consolidation of Socrates. It's a very new report that you can download on the conference website. And there you'll find a section about all those aspects that Matthias and I have talked about. And yeah, feel free to have a look, because we also wrote down possible solutions and ways to tackle those bottlenecks. And I am very sure that many of you might be interested in the solution that we have envisioned. And as I said, it's some of those bottlenecks are still not really solved. Yeah, so I think that discussion needs to go on. So you will find also email addresses with us, and I will be happy to stay in touch with the ITS and traffic management community to talk about those issues, maybe in follow-up projects as well. So let's stay in touch.
Okay, that's a nice invite to all. Thank you, Peter. Well, let's go back and look at the reactions in the Mentimeter. So we ask you, which enablers and bottlenecks did you encounter in your projects? I see we have some answers. I see issues when merging data. Yeah, that was an issue as well in our project. The politics, nice one. Well, Peter, Matthias, where do you want to react to what?
Well, I would say that somehow confirms the categories we identified and discussed. So it's on the one side about having the appropriate and required technical expertise, and that's an issue. As far as I know, but probably we would need to check with the colleagues from the Socrates project. There was once from Ertico provided a list of experts in the domain of at least cooperative ITS. So this may be a touch point. Otherwise, there's the DataX2 website if it's about the standards for traffic management systems. Yeah, Mark, you already mentioned merging data. It's a challenge because there it's I would say at least two aspects. The one is for sure is the standard used in a harmonized way? That's the first one. So if somebody says, oh, well, there's an apple on the road, and the second one, oh, it's a pear, what's the truth, right? Maybe tiny details. Second is exactly, and we face that as well, it's about location referencing. So when you want to merge data, you need to bring that into context. The context is probably the common road network behind that. So location referencing is key. And what you see is that there are different approaches or technologies used, which may cause some technical hiccups. At least it's more effort is required. Mark, Peter, some thoughts from your side?
Yeah, I am just wondering about the lack of data, and I wish to be able to talk to the person who wrote this, because in my opinion, lack of data for me is never an issue. I think many cases you have too many data and you don't know how to deal with them. Maybe I would love to rephrase this to maybe the lack of accessibility to data, or you don't manage data well, or you have to buy it. So I think in many cases their data is there even in a small road authority, but maybe it's not digitalized, or maybe it's not the right format, or maybe it's not accessible. So maybe I would love to have the discussion on this topic here. So, but yeah, maybe next time.
Well, that can be done, of course, in the online cafe after after the plenary. So
yeah, thank you.
You both are there, maybe on the stand of here or in the stand of the BAST. So you can talk to Peter and Matthias themselves, because we can't answer all the questions right now. We have only 1 minute left. So I think I have to close this breakout session. Matthias, Peter, thank you very much for your explanation, and also thank you to the audience for the attention and your reactions. If you have other questions, you can come to the online cafe after the plenary. So you can, in real life, well, semi-real life, put your answers or ask anything at Peter and Matthias. For now, we return to the plenary session. You do this by clicking the top button on the main conference page. It's titled Join the Plenary Session. And then we see you all there. Thank you very much. Until later.
Bye. Thank you.
Thank you all.